Something inside you already knows. Before any explanation, before any structure the mind might use to organize what it's feeling, some very quiet part of you already knows what's happening, why you clicked. Here, what you were looking for when you arrived at this video, at this specific moment. And perhaps the most honest thing to say is this: you didn't get here by accident. There's a gravity to these things, an attraction between what you already are internally and what resonates with that on the outside, as if certain words, certain spaces, certain pauses find you when you're already ready to be found. Stay here for a moment. Feel the weight of your body where you're sitting, the temperature of the air, the background sound, whatever it may be, because what will happen in the next few minutes will require you to be present. And presence begins with this: realizing that you have a body, that this body is in a specific place, and that this specific place is where the change happens, not on an altar. Here, in a new timeline that began before you realized you had crossed it. The reality you're about to inhabit more fully is not a future construct. It exists now, waiting to be recognized by the only self that can recognize it, the present self. The self that stops projecting itself forward long enough to perceive what is already available here. And this perception, it has already begun. Let me describe something you probably know inside out. There's a very specific way to wake up when you're in this state. Consciousness returns, and before the body is fully awake, the mind is already taking inventory, checking, measuring the distance between where you are and where you want to be, as if the whole day were a test you still need to pass before you can feel like who you truly are. It's exhausting in a way that goes beyond physical tiredness. It's the weariness of carrying an identity that's always just arriving, always one step away from finally being itself, as long as the world confirms it, as long as the circumstances align, as long as the evidence appears. And the research you consume: videos, texts, concepts, stories of people who made it. For a moment, something ignites. Yes, that's it. And then the spark fades, and you're back in the same internal place, only with more vocabulary to describe where you're stuck. Because the problem was never a lack of knowledge. It was something else, something quieter, a very old thread that said, first the world changes, then I change. First the proof appears, then I believe. First the circumstances confirm, then I allow myself to be. And the patterns kept repeating themselves. Different situations, different characters, but something in the emotional texture was recognizable, like watching the same movie with the scenery changed. You change jobs, you change cities, you change relationships, and for a while, it seems like everything is different. But the inner state, that state of someone still waiting for confirmation, travels along because it wasn't in the circumstances, it was in the field from which you inhabited each new circumstance. There's also that experience of observing yourself from the outside, as if a part of you knows exactly what you're doing, sabotaging, contracting, choosing the familiar even when the familiar hurts. And yet you watch without being able to fully intervene, not for the lack of willpower, but because identity has its own gravity, and it will always pull behavior back toward what is consistent with what it believes to be true about you. Do you know what's most revealing about this experience? That you were never passive in it. You tried, genuinely, deeply tried. You practiced, committed, applied everything you learned with real honesty. And yet there was this mysterious gap between effort and lasting change. The most important question isn't why you failed. You didn't fail. It's that the effort was being directed in the wrong place, outward, when the real leverage was inward. Inward, when the change that matters begins with identity. This is where everything shifts. Identity is not a consequence of how things are going. It is the field from which things move. This sentence deserves silence afterward. So read it again and be silent. Think of someone, anyone you know, who possesses a specific quality of presence. Someone who enters a room and transforms it, whose conversations end with you feeling different than when you started, who seems to inhabit the space with a lightness that doesn't depend on things being perfect. You know who that person is. Now, what makes her like this? The most honest answer isn't talent, luck, or favorable circumstances. It's identity. It's a sense of self that isn't constantly negotiating with what's happening around her. She doesn't need the day to go well to be who she is. She already is, regardless of the day. This state is not rare. It is not reserved for the enlightened or the exceptional. It is the natural state of an identity that has stopped dividing itself. And here it becomes more concrete. This division that most people carry lives in the body before it lives in the mind. It has a very specific physical texture, a subtle contraction in the shoulders, a breath that doesn't fully descend, a low-intensity vigilance that never completely shuts off, like an alarm that was left on after the danger passed. Do you now realize where the tension is in your body? I'm not asking you to dissolve it yet, just to acknowledge it, because that acknowledgement, that gentle honesty with what the body is carrying, is already the beginning of something different. The change in identity begins when you stop trying to convince your mind and start inhabiting your body in a different way. When your posture changes, not as a performance, but as an internal declaration of who you are. When your breath goes deeper, not because you commanded it to, but because the self you are inhabiting has space for it. Your body knows the version of you that you are. Your job is to let him carry it, and that simple act of letting go is perhaps the most countercultural thing there is, because we've been trained to do, to conquer, to prove. The idea that the most profound change begins with settling down, with letting go, with surrendering to the identity that already exists instead of climbing toward an identity that hasn't yet arrived. That goes against almost everything we've learned about how things work. But the body already knows. Every time you were completely present in a moment, without any agenda, without any momentary worries, just you and what was happening, you felt it. That quality of wholeness that doesn't need any external conditions to exist. That feeling of being exactly the right size for the space you occupy. That absence of the small internal friction that usually doesn't stop. These moments were not accidents. Faux flashes of the self that you already are emerge when the internal division ceases, even if only briefly. There is a constant conversation happening between who you believe you are and the world that appears around you. It's not a metaphor. It's how the nervous system works, filtering from the billions of pieces of information available every second, precisely those that are relevant to the identity being inhabited. A person in a state of scarcity literally perceives evidence of scarcity that a person in a state of abundance in the same environment does not register. Neurons that fire together connect, and what you expect to find is what the brain learns to highlight. Reality isn't happening for you. It is being co-created with you, from you, through the filter of the self that you are at this moment. Imagine two people walking down the same street, one carrying that state of contraction, monitoring, evaluating, measuring. The other, rooted in an identity that doesn't need constant validation. They are geographically on the same street, but inhabit completely different realities. The first passes by the opportunity without noticing because they are too busy looking for threats. The second finds the conversation, the detail, the opening, because they are in a perceptual field that allows these things to be seen. This is not positive thinking disguised as neuroscience. It is the recognition that perception and identity are inseparable, and that change in one inevitably changes the other. So when you change who you are internally, when identity settles in a deeper place, when the body stops carrying the tension of someone waiting to be confirmed, the world around you begins to show you different things. The conversation changes subject. Opportunities that seemed invisible become visible. People respond to a version of you that you may still be discovering. And all of this happens because of the simplest logic possible. The mirror reflects what is in front of it. When you change, the reflection changes. Stay here. Feel the weight of this, the beautiful weight of this, landing on you now. Because what's happening in this moment isn't learning. It's recognition. It's that specific feeling of hearing something you already knew, but needed to hear aloud to become completely real. The change has already happened, not as a promise, as a present fact. The moment something internal shifted, the moment you began to feel, even timidly, that identity can come before the test. You crossed a line of no return. You are already that version. Think about it for real. The version of yourself that you imagine when you close your eyes. The one that moves through the world with a different quality, that makes decisions from a more complete place, that lets things happen without the hesitation of someone who doubts they deserve it. That version isn't in the future waiting for you. It's here now, being inhabited more and more completely. With each moment, you choose not to need external confirmation to know who you are, and reality is shifting. Sometimes the first sign is internal, a different quality of silence, a lightness that appears in moments where before there was only heaviness. Sometimes it's in small things around you, a conversation that takes an unexpected turn, something you were looking for appearing effortlessly. The external world is always a slightly delayed echo of the internal world, so the reflections come later. But they do come. You don't need to force it. The version of you that you are now simply lives, breathes, drinks coffee, goes to work, answers messages. And in all these ordinary moments, something different is being emitted. not because you're trying to emit something, but because identity always radiates, whether you want it to or not. The old identity radiated expectation, contraction, negotiation with the outside world. This radiates something completely different. You feel it in your body now. This possibility of settling down, of letting your shoulders drop a little more, of allowing your breath to go deeper, not as an exercise, but as a natural consequence of a self that has space to exist without needing to justify itself. This is the texture of the version of yourself that you already are. She doesn't need an audience. She doesn't need validation. She's not waiting for the world to fall into place before allowing herself to be whole, and the reality around her is learning to speak to her. There's a very specific quality to the end of a conversation that was genuine, a stillness that is different from the silence of before, richer, more inhabited, as if the inner space had expanded slightly and now held more air, more light, more possibility of simply being. This is how I want you to end this. Without resolving anything, without carrying anything over to the next item on the list, without turning this into a project or a practice or just another thing to monitor. Just let what happened here, inside you, in this interval of time that was more real than most passing hours, exist lightly. The timeline you entered is not fragile. It doesn't depend on you never doubting. It doesn't depend on waking up tomorrow with all your feelings in the right places. It doesn't depend on perfection in any of its forms. It depends on only one thing. Who have you already decided who you are? And that decision, quiet, profound, made far below the level of the conscious mind, has already been made. The world will continue to show you echoes of your old identity for a while, not as a sign that nothing has changed, but as the simple law that echoes take time to fade. When you hear these echoes, you don't need to fight them. Just know what they are. Acoustic memories of a version that's been left behind. You will leave here, and life will continue to be life, with its specific texture of challenges and surprises, and moments of doubt and moments of crystal clarity. And in all of this, what has changed will continue to change. Not spectacularly, but in a way that becomes clearer with time, like a photograph that develops slowly but fully unfolds. You are in a new timeline. She knows you, and you're starting to get to know yourself as the person she always knew you were.